Warning, this podcast contains adult themes, profanity, speculative science, and wildly inappropriate theories about the end of humanity. If you're sensitive to topics like infectious disease, drug use, apocalypse jokes, or talking about zombies like they're real, you might want to keep walking. We're not here to comfort you, we're here to freak you out. In a good way. Probably. Did you know rabies is the only disease where biting someone might actually make you feel better? Ba-doom-sh.
Ha!
But legally we're not recommending that unless you're a raccoon. Then do your thing. Welcome to Mutant Hollow, where the spores are thick, the science is speculative, and the apocalypse is always just one mutation away. I'm Amber, your guide through the haunted forest of infectious disease, folklore, and crypto microbiology. And joining me is the brilliant and slightly feral Stacy, our resident creature doctor, broadcasting from her cozy little dungeon with her trusty mic, affectionately known as the Fuzzy Soul Eater. Together we'll explore everything from real-world pathogens to legendary monsters, piecing together how a zombie outbreak could happen, or maybe already is. So grab your gloves, put on your plague mask, and cuddle up with your favorite cursed object, because you've just stepped into Mutant Hollow, where science gets spooky and weird is always welcome.
But boob cordyceps or not?
Hydration is key to the prevention of boob cordyceps.
Public service announcement. Rabies is real. And yes, it's almost 100% fatal once your symptoms appear. But guess what's also real? A vaccine. And it works. So if you have a mystery bite or you interact with suspicious raccoons, make sure that you reach out to your medical professional and get that vaccine. Don't wait until you're foaming at the mouth. That's our PSA. It's not sponsored by the CDC, but it should be.
Yeah, or if you did wait till you're foaming at the mouth, though, or had any kind of symptoms, be too late anyway.
Yeah, you're gonna die.
Sorry.
Oops, sorry.
This is Mutant Hollow, where we blend infectious disease, spooky folklore, and speculative science to explore how a zombie apocalypse might actually happen. We're not just talking fiction, we're talking fungus, viruses, parasites, and evolution gone wrong. I'm Amber, and with me is our resident creature doctor, Stacy.
Oh, hey. Sorry, I felt weird. I felt like I should have said something.
Today's episode is about my favorite virus in the zombie canon, rabies. Why? Because it ticks all the boxes. It spreads through bites, it messes with your brain, it turns mammals, including us, into confused, drooling, bite-happy maniacs. It's horrifying, it's famous, and it's real. Could it evolve into something worse? Something more? Zombie-like? Stacy, this one is all yours. Can you give us the rundown on the virus itself?
I definitely can. So rabies is a lyssavirus, and it's a neurotropic RNA virus. So what that means is instead of DNA, it uses RNA, and it means that it is happiest in nerves and nervous tissue. That's what the definition of neurotropic is. It's also zoonotic, which means that animals can pass it to humans, and there's typically 600,000 rabies deaths per year in the world. And once you start to have symptoms of rabies encephalitis, it's almost 100% fatal. And it really only infects mammals. There's some debate about that, but generally it only infects mammals. And it infects mammals via saliva contact with the bloodstream, so bites.
There's no treatment, right? If your dog gets rabies, there's no hope.
Yeah. So if a domestic animal contracts rabies, there's nothing they can do for them. And it's really hard because we can't even test humans or animals. We can't test them for rabies until they are dead. The only way to test for it is to take a piece of brain tissue and look for these little inclusions or little round areas in the brain cells that are packets of virus. There's no way to test for this in a living being. So if your animal gets it, they must be euthanized or destroyed if it's a agricultural animal or wild animal, and tested. In humans, there's no known treatment, although there was 1 or 2 case reports about humans that were placed into a medically induced coma for a prolonged period of time while they had signs of active encephalitis. And those humans were able to wake up, but they weren't normal. There was one person that was mostly normal when she was lost to follow-up in the US, but most people have profound long-term effects if they do survive the infection. And is a medically induced coma a treatment? Not necessarily. It's just leading to less suffering while the body is going through the encephalitis period.
Wow, I didn't realize that there wasn't, or maybe I have forgotten, but I didn't realize that there was no way to really test it except for dead brain tissue. But it makes sense if it's not circulating in the blood tissue, if it has a tropism for neural tissue and brain, then that's where it's going to live. It's not going to be circulating throughout the bloodstream where you can do a simple blood test.
Right. I think they can do brain biopsies in humans, but as a creature doctor, we don't do that in our animal species. So pretty much there's no ante-mortem or before death test.
So no blood test.
Nope.
It's kind of cool.
Or
Usually
scary.
you'd think,
Really
or
sad.
scary. Yeah. But usually a lot of stuff is circulating throughout the bloodstream. You can test for it easily, but this one legit lives in your brain. That's a tropism. It's kind of cool.
And with animals, we can't really necessarily test, at least with our domestic species, we can't really test for antibodies for exposure to rabies because we are giving them vaccinations that make their body produce the antibodies to the rabies. Yeah.
Would you still test it even though they've been vaccinated? What percent efficacy does the vaccine have?
I mean, it's like 99.9999999% effective. The only animals that I have tested as a veterinarian living where I live, where there's not a lot of rabies, is perhaps animals that were feral that came in, and there was a known bite to a human. So we had to know if that animal has had rabies. And I have been practicing for 14 or 15 years, and I have seen 3 animals test positive for rabies.
Oh, so it's not very common anymore?
Yeah, it's not. Well, it's not common in domestic animals in the United States.
Oh, domestic animals. But you've been practicing longer than that, because I just remember you saying that you worked at a vet hospital when you were like 15 when you had that crazy mushroom story in episode 1.
Oh, that doesn't count. That doesn't count as practicing. I mean, as a doctor. I've been a doctor for that long. Yeah.
Fair enough.
That was just me, like, mopping the floors, the blood.
You mean the gummy bear men?
The bloody gummy bear man. Yeah.
Heck yeah, if you haven't listened to episode 1, you should go back and check that out for sure.
I know, you're not really going to put it in there.
Hell yeah, yeah.
But humans, there's some other testing that we can do. We don't have to take their brain to test them while they're alive.
And I just love the fact that this is a neurotropic virus, because if you're going to talk about zombie organisms or an organism or infectious disease that can zombify something, I feel that really loves brain tissue, or brains, is the perfect organism. Hell yeah. So once symptoms begin, it's almost 100% fatal. And that's horrifying, but I think there's some confusion because there's a vaccine, right? So why does this even happen in humans, and why are people dying if there's a vaccine? Can you explain why humans don't get it prophylactically?
Vaccination is extremely effective. It's almost 100% protective if you're vaccinated prior to rabies exposure. And that's why we strongly recommend, and many states and countries require, rabies vaccination for rabies vector species, especially pets like dogs and cats. For us humans, the vaccination is also extremely effective, but it's quite expensive, and you need a series of the vaccinations. And they save the vaccine for humans that have been exposed to rabies. So they're trying to prevent deaths that way rather than protect the whole population. So for us humans, if we have a potential exposure to a rabies carrying other human or animal, then part of that post-exposure care is the vaccine. You get a series of the vaccine. And you also get immunoglobulin, which is antibody proteins, injected around the area of the bite in the hopes that your immune system will kill the rabies virus before it starts to migrate from the bite site into your nervous tissue.
I think this is fascinating and very interesting. So if you have a vaccine that's for flu, so flu vaccine, you take it every year and it's commonly used because flu is everywhere all the time. So people don't have a lot of exposure to rabies except for people in your profession, animal doctors and stuff like that, right? So is that why?
Yeah, I'm vaccinated.
Most people are unlikely to encounter rabid animals. You deal with them probably all the time. I hope you have some incredible rabid animal stories where it looks like a zombie foaming at the mouth and it's like, I'm gonna eat your brains.
Dude, I have some crazy shit. Yeah. Do you want to hear it now?
Yes.
You brought it up. This is your fault.
Yes. Yeah.
Before I was a doctor, when I was a veterinary technician or nurse, I was working in Florida and we had a stray cat that was absolutely unhinged.
The following segment contains a disturbing story involving a cat with rabies. If you're sensitive to stories about animal illness or distress, we recommend skipping ahead about 5 minutes. Your comfort is important to us. Feel free to rejoin us after this part.
Attempting to kill everyone around it, screaming at the top of its lungs, that came in by the county specifically for euthanasia because it had been terribly injured and it was exhibiting these insane behaviors. And it was so crazy that nobody could touch it. And we were trying to give it anesthesia because we wanted to limit its suffering. So we were trying to give it injectable anesthesia. So drugs that would help it to relax and fall asleep prior to performing euthanasia. And we hit it with enough injectable anesthesia to take down a horse. We were using horse doses of our typical anesthetic drugs.
Wow.
And we couldn't get this cat to fall asleep. We couldn't get it to go to sleep at all. So then we had to use inhaled anesthesia because it was no longer safe for us to be in proximity. So we had to put it in a little anesthesia chamber and pump in inhaled anesthesia. And a typical animal, although we don't do it really at all anymore, but back then this was many years ago, it was a way to get them under anesthesia. The typical animal would fall asleep within 5 minutes with that inhaled anesthesia. It was the same stuff that we used in surgery, just pumped into a little chamber. This cat would not fall asleep, so it had horse doses of anesthesia injected into its muscle, and it was in the anesthesia box for 15 minutes before it slowed down. It was in there for like 20 minutes before it was all the way asleep so that we could safely handle it to give it a euthanasia solution injection to perform an actual euthanasia for it. And then after the euthanasia solution, it continued to have a heartbeat for another 10 minutes, which is unheard of. Crazy, right? So of course, all of us were like, hey, we're in Florida. This is an extremely aggressive feral stray cat. We must test it for rabies because it could have exposed humans and the craziness of it fit the profile of symptoms. So we did actually test that cat for rabies and it came back positive. Thank God no one was bit or injured. But that was one of the first rabies cases that I had ever experienced as a professional in animal medicine.
That's insane. So rabies infected beings could be like these super aggressive, dangerous, and otherworldly. I don't want to say otherworldly, but they have superhuman, super cat, or super mammalian abilities.
It was one of the scariest things I have ever seen. It was like viscerally upsetting.
Wow. So it has an incredible drive to bite because the viral infection is so great that it's affecting the mind. And rabies is incredible because it takes over the brain and makes you super aggressive because it wants to pass on the virus so much. It has such a strong ability to do that it makes the host incredibly violent and aggressive. You're foaming at the mouth because your saliva is full of these viruses and it really wants to pass it on by breaking open a victim's skin and injecting or introducing the virus into the bloodstream. So that is the reason why it was so aggressive. But what is the reason why it lasted so long under huge amounts of anesthesia?
I don't know. It was the creepiest. It was possessed. It was a demonic cat. I got nothing. I don't know. I mean, perhaps, well, that's not true. I do have an idea. So anesthesia slows the signals in the brain and it depresses consciousness, right? That's the whole reason we use it. But if your brain is on fire from a rabies viral encephalitis, then the normal mechanisms of action that suppress the function of those frontal cortex neurons, it's not functioning correctly. The voltage-gated channels aren't working in those cells or aren't working appropriately. Your blood flow to that area is altered. So it may be that it didn't get the doses of the drugs that would normally have gotten directly into those neurons and suppressed consciousness weren't making their way into those neurons or weren't changing the neuronal processes the way that it does in a normal brain.
So what I hear you saying is this was a real life zombie that was partially dead or in some ways that we can't necessarily measure, had some deadness in it, and it was really scary and aggressive, and its body was going on without any action of brain, consciousness, feeling, or emotions like a cat normally would have, seeking comfort and affection. And so this is a real life zombie. And I'm telling you, rabies is so high on the will it zombie scale, in my opinion. And we can talk about that later. But I feel like it's so high because it's already making freaking zombies, Stacy. So tell me that's not a real zombie in real life.
I mean, it wasn't. It was a cat with rabies viral encephalitis.
Ugh. You're the worst.
I'm so sorry. I know, I burst your bubble every time. But it was deeply frightening.
That sounds incredible. I wouldn't want to be in that room, but I would watch you guys on TV for sure.
The sounds that cat were... I mean, what? This was... Well, how old am I? I don't want to answer that question. So it was probably like 20 years ago, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that was a wild ride. Now back to the episode.
Can you talk about why the rabies vaccine isn't ubiquitous? Because I think you mentioned it earlier, but can you talk about the cost or availability and stuff like that? And who should get it and who shouldn't?
Yeah, so let's talk about the domestic animals first. Domestic animal rabies virus for dogs and cats is pretty easy to get. Pretty much everywhere in the United States, every municipality requires owned animals to be current on their rabies vaccinations. Some places will allow an animal's veterinarian to write an affidavit that that animal is not safe to vaccinate them. Like if they have an autoimmune disorder or particular types of cancer, we try not to stress those animals with immunizations or vaccinations. But pretty much everywhere you can get it, and it's required by law for an owned companion domestic animal to get the rabies vaccine. In countries where rabies is more prevalent and more humans are being affected by it, those domestic animal vaccination rates are extremely low. But we're working as a World Health component to increase vaccine availability and to increase vaccine education, especially for companion animals in those areas. And then there's some wildlife vaccination programs too, both in the US and Africa, India, where they are taking giant planes full of tasty oral rabies vaccine bait and just sprinkling it all over the wilderness and hoping that the reservoir animals will eat that vaccine. And there's been some success with it in the United States with raccoon vaccinations that way. But there's not a lot of government agencies to pay for those vaccinations. So the times that they've been done, it's been spotty. And you really need a pretty good program of regular vaccination, at least for a couple of generations, to really decrease rabies exposure for those particular animals that are reservoirs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really smart idea. And I think maybe when people are thinking about why are they doing this with this pathogen and not others, we've talked about the recipe for a pandemic or the recipe for an apocalypse. And I just want to review a couple of those points really quick so we can talk about why rabies is so fucking special. When we're talking about the criteria that's needed to start a plague or pandemic, infectivity is one of them. So rabies is incredibly lethal. And so that's why the whole world isn't dead, because if you get infected and you get symptoms, you're going to die and you don't have a chance to spread it. But if there was a mutation, for example, that reduced the lethality just enough that you could spread it a little bit before you died, or if you turned into a zombie, for example, where you have the capability of continued transmission after your body was taken over by the virus and you pretty much lose most of your normal life abilities, normal breathing, eating and drinking and functioning and speaking, then this could be one of the best organisms to start a zombie apocalypse ever in existence. And I don't know how you feel about it, but this is literally the one where it makes you aggressive. It makes you terrifying. It makes you want to bite people, literally. Can you talk about why you want to bite people and like how that transmission works and talk a little bit about the lethality and stuff like that? Because this virus is so fascinating to me. I can't express enough how real this already seems in everyday life, how it already seems like the most perfect zombie organism ever.
It feels great as a zombie organism, right? But I, as a general skeptic, I have some thoughts about how it might not be as good on the surface as we think it is to start the apocalypse.
Are you serious right now, Stacey?
I know this is your favorite and I'm ruining your dreams.
You're the worst. You're the absolute really bad. Worst.
I know, I'm no fun at all. But just bear with me. Tell me what you think about this once I'm done going off about it. So, rabies is one of the diseases that has been the most documented in the most places around the world than any other disease that we know of. So we as humans have evolved right next to the rabies virus. And so I think that we instinctually, as part of our human memory, know that if we see the symptoms that look like rabies, that we need to run away from that animal or other human, that we need to get away, don't get near them, right? So I think that for transmission-wise, if we didn't know instinctually that another human that was exhibiting the behavior associated with rabies, hyperaggression, fear of water, dysphagia, so they're foaming at the mouth because they can't swallow their own saliva, erratic behavior changes, all of that, if we didn't know deep down that was bad, I think that it could spread faster. But as a human memory, gene memory, we've been growing up our entire evolution with the rabies virus. So it's kind of ingrained in us to run the other way, right? So we would have to get rid of that type of ingrained instinctual response. Okay, so that's just purely speculative, but that's my theory about that. Now, when it comes to infectivity, I mean, it's pretty damn infectious. If a part of your tissue, your skin, your blood, your muscles, your nerves is exposed to the rabies virus, even a small amount of virus, it's likely that you're going to become infected. But the virus itself is really fragile. So unless it's in a body, and ideally unless it's in nervous tissue or salivary tissue, it's not a very happy virus. And it dies really, really quickly in the environment, especially with UV light, like fast, dead virus.
Pause. So can I just translate that for everyone? I just want to say that means if you cough up some viral particles from your saliva onto the countertop and then somebody else comes along and touches that and then touches their water cup or eats something and puts it in their mouth, especially if it's outside and exposed to sunlight and UV light, then it's not likely to transmit very well that way through environmental exposure and things like that because it degrades in the environment really quickly. So it would have to most likely go directly from the mouth and saliva of the infected person into a bite to another person or animal that breaks the skin. So you would have to have exposure so the virus can jump into the bloodstream. And another thing, can you explain a little bit why you don't swallow and why you're overproducing saliva and why you don't want to dilute the saliva with water? So the virus is tricking your brain into thinking you're terrified of water because it doesn't want you to drink water and dilute the virus that's in your saliva, which I think is incredibly fascinating. And it also tricks you into thinking you don't want to swallow that saliva because you want all of those virus particles that are trapped in your saliva to stay in your mouth and compel you to bite somebody or something. It makes you angry and aggressive and it's foaming up because you're not swallowing it. There's an excess amount and it is telling your brain, don't swallow, don't dilute it, bite somebody and transmit the virus. It has a very strong transmission need or want, or it compels you to transmit the virus. So I think that's incredibly fascinating too.
Yeah, the drive for transmission. Yeah.
Yes.
It's wild. It's wild. Now I'm just gonna go back a little bit with what you were saying, Amber. So you had said that sure you can't get it from touching a surface that somebody that had rabies spit upon and that saliva was dried. You're exactly right. And in almost every case, it's saliva to tissue and bloodstream for transmission. But there have been some documented cases of aerosolized exposure to high loads of the virus leading to infection. So that's going to be a key for me when I'm hypothesizing a way that the zombie virus or that the rabies virus could become a zombie virus. If you have enough of an exposure to aerosolized virus, you can develop symptoms of rabies. I'll let that sink in.
Wow. Is that a real thing right now? It can already be transmitted via the aerosol route?
Yeah, it's a real thing. Do you want an idea of how that could happen?
Yes, let me hear it.
So this is pure fiction, but the science behind it is mostly accurate.
Okay.
They were at one point in time speculating about using giant industrial vacuum cleaners to suck out bats from colonies for extermination. So just running a giant pipe up a cave and sucking all the bats out. Well, bats are tiny and they're very fragile. And so when they were maybe sucking with a giant vacuum cleaner all the bats out of the cave system, you can envision that some of them would become significantly damaged or maybe even just explode during that, just strictly due to the amount of tissue trauma that's happening with a giant vacuum cleaner and a whole colony of bats bouncing off of each other. So then you have a giant aerosolized bat cloud, and then Mike is working the vacuum cleaner. He might have a face shield on, but maybe not a full hazmat suit. And he has a sudden urge to cough, sucks in a giant breath before the cough, and then now his lungs are full of aerosolized bat. And then he's got rabies. No? Too much? I think it's too speculative?
No. I love this. But also, just to go back a little bit, there's 2 points that I want to make. The first one is the transmission part of the recipe for a pandemic is we all are hoping for, if you here's my disclaimer, you're hoping for it if you are cool with like a zombie apocalypse happening. But if you're looking for that to happen, you want aerosol transmission because that is the best, most effective, easiest way to spread as much infectious particles as possible to as many people as possible. And so the scenario that you just gave us would be one way in which it can be transmitted via the aerosol route. But if there was a mutation where it made you cough instead of just salivating and it intended for you to bite something in order to transmit it. If there was a mutation where all of a sudden it transmitted naturally via the aerosol route and it created a cough and then it resided in your lungs instead of in your mouth, then that's the classic way where aerosol transmission happens. And that's what we all kind of fear with any organism. Just like with bird flu happening right now, at some point it did jump to zoonosis where it went from an animal to a person. And that is one beautiful component of a recipe for a pandemic. Or an apocalypse. And then aerosol transmission was the other one. And so if you're in a facility, and even though you're washing your hands and taking care of the environmental exposure, if you are breathing in the air and you don't have on a PAPR, a HEPA filter, a PAPR is like a personal air respirator, or a HEPA filter or an N95, then you're breathing in infectious particles that way. My other favorite component of this is bats are super cute and famous for spreading a whole lot of really exotic and powerful diseases. And one of them is like Ebola and Marburg virus, which make you bleed out of your eyeball. I just want to plant that little seed of excitement for anyone in the future. Maybe we'll talk about something like that happening, but I did like your example, but there are so many more. And also the more interesting route of aerosol transmission would be a mutation. Does rabies have a high mutation rate? I don't think so, right? Can you talk about the mutation rate? Because that's what would create the risk of increasing its transmissibility through aerosol route and reducing the lethality enough to transmit better, or it would adapt the virus to make zombies that would help transmit, since it kills you so quickly. If you made it zombie, then you don't have to worry about your host dying.
The mutation rate in rabies is exceedingly slow. Otherwise, we'd all be dead.
Hell yeah.
The lethality thing, yeah, it's going to kill you. You're going to die from it, but it might take 10 days for you to actually die. So there's still a good amount of time to get down and spread it around, you know. Back to your point about aerosolized with a cough, I don't even know if it needs to mutate necessarily to be comfortable in lung tissue, because it's such a neurotropic virus. It has to live in the nervous system to be happy. I think that the jump to the lungs might be difficult, but you know, if you can't swallow your saliva because the virus is affecting your muscles of swallowing, the muscles of the larynx and the pharynx, the back of the mouth and the throat, if you're coughing, you're automatically going to be coughing saliva out. So I think that we could still theorize about an aerosolized transmission without the virus having to replicate in the lungs, as long as it's coughing, there's some sort of coughing happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I also want to make a note for anyone who's listening that tropism means it's an attraction towards a specific bodily tissue. So some viruses, like the flu, like to live in your nose or your lungs, or some bacteria that are attracted to your lungs. That are some that, like this, that like brain tissue or nervous system tissue. And I think even with a tropism like this, it still might be difficult via the aerosol route, because even though you have a high viral load in your mouth and you could cough at any point in time and you have all that saliva, if somebody breathes that in, I wonder if the transmission is harder to get to the bloodstream. If you swallow it, then your stomach acids might kill some of it. If it goes into your nose, it might not like the cooler temperature like flu does. If it goes into the lung tissue, that's when maybe it could encounter some sort of blood vessel if you have some sort of lung damage like COPD or something like that. But I think lung tissue is one of the immunoprivileged sites where it's very difficult. It's kind of like the blood-brain barrier, where you have difficulty transmitting any kind of materials or blood or nutrients, have a hard time going in and out of lung tissue. It's hard to get lung tissue inflamed, and when it does, it stays there for a long time because it has its own little special environment. So I'm wondering if maybe it's unlikely to transmit via aerosol route that way, or maybe it's difficult, but that's one of the mutations that I would like to see, or that would be necessary for turning it into a zombie virus. Basically, right now we're talking about, well, what would it take? So the lethality could be turned down a little bit, or it could use the creation of the zombie to continue. Transmission would have to change a little bit more towards aerosol and less direct saliva to bloodstream. What are some other mutations that would need to take place? Greater mutagenicity. It would have to be able to mutate faster, because right now it's pretty stable where it's at. What are some other ones that you can think of?
Before I think about more mutations, I would argue that if you get a ton of rabies saliva in your nose and you accidentally sniff that into the back of your sinuses, our olfactory nerves and our olfactory bulb, the part of our brain that interprets smell, is right there. And since rabies virus is happiest and moves through nerves and the nervous system, it feels like there might be direct access to the brain. And in fact, you are more likely to show symptoms of infection faster if you receive a rabies-infected bite closer to your head. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, that is crazy. And I didn't think about that, because it doesn't necessarily have to pass the blood-brain barrier as easily if it has a tropism for nerve tissue or nerves in general.
Yeah. So it's just going to be like, oh, I'm right by your brain. Let's do this thing.
Great. So that is one of the hurdles that I think a lot of organisms have, is passing the blood-brain barrier. And this already has, it's kind of like a shoe-in already. It's already there.
Shoe in your brain.
But since it likes that nervous system tissue and nerve tissue and brain tissue already, it has that tropism for those types of tissues. It's already one of the most perfect organisms, I think, for turning into a zombie mutation.
I feel like you were on my side for a second, that it wasn't going to happen, and then I said that one thing, and now you're back on your side again.
Okay, I'm never going to be on your side. You're wrong. I'm sorry. You're always just annoyingly irrational about stuff, but even if it takes a few thousand years, this is totally possible, and this is one of the most perfect ones. If I were to give this a score, which we'll talk about that later, don't give it a score yet, but if I were to give it a score, this is one of the best ones.
I mean, it's good. Well, it's good. It's good. And it's been a popular base for zombie fiction, right? Because it's good. You're exactly right. There's a lot of things about the zombie virus that feel zombie-esque already. Yeah. But we need to make it more hardy in the environment. So it needs to mutate so that UV light doesn't kill it immediately and then it doesn't dry out and die. We need to make it so you don't have to have close physical contact like a bite to spread the virus. Ideally, we would make it a little bit faster from the time of exposure to the time of being transmissible, which with rabies virus, to be able to transmit that virus, you have to have symptoms of the viral encephalitis, right? Like, if grandma got bit today, she's not going to give you rabies tomorrow because she's still grandma. She has to turn into a rabid grandma to spread the rabies.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah, because there are some infectious organisms where you can be passing it along for days or weeks and have no idea, but this isn't one of those, huh?
Yeah, because it has to get into you, it has to get to your brain, it has to hang out there for a little while, it has to cause encephalitis, and then it has to go back into the salivary glands. It's kind of how it becomes transmissible. So that's a long road and pathway to get from a small bat bite to a world-ending zombie apocalypse.
Is that why it takes so long? It could take months before you have symptoms because it has to go through that whole journey first?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So if you're bit on your toe, it might be 8 months before you have any symptoms, right? Because it's far away from your brain. It's got a lot of traveling to do.
That makes sense.
Am I ruining it? Am I ruining it for you?
No, fuck no.
Fuck no. Hold on.
I still have faith.
Hold on.
I still have faith. Can you talk about the paralysis?
Yeah, the two forms? Right. Thanks.
Yeah.
This is really cool too. So 2/3 of animals or humans that are affected by the rabies virus and develop symptoms will have what's called the furious form of rabies. And this is the one that we're talking about for zombie apocalypse. This is the one where they are aggressive. They have a raging fever. They avoid water. They are not able to swallow their own saliva or any food. And they are running around like crazy people trying to fight everyone. The furious form. So 2/3 of patients with rabies have the furious form, which we are assuming would be the zombie apocalypse form. But the other 1/3 of animals or humans with rabies virus have what's called the paralytic form. And with that, they still get the fever. They may or may not have the dysphagia, the inability to swallow. But they will actually have loss of muscle control, and they'll have little muscle tremors everywhere. They're called fasciculations. And they may lose the power of speech. Thought you might like that. They might lose the ability to recognize other family members or humans around them, and eventually they'll slip into a coma and die. So that's the paralytic form.
Okay, so I love that it's called furious form, like legit. I think that's pretty funny, or metal, or something. So do the infected people in furious form also lose their ability to speak because they can't swallow? I thought they also had some neurological issues where they couldn't speak very well either.
Yeah, eventually they do. But like the paralytic form, and if you're interested in watching this, it's really disturbing, but we're going to have some links to some documentation of humans with either the paralytic or the furious form of rabies. If you feel so inclined to check that out, you'll have the resource to do so. But they do, but it takes a little bit longer for them, and they're still often making guttural type noises like zombie groans. Whereas the paralytic form, those patients are they become very quiet faster, and they don't make necessarily a lot of the vocalizations that the people that are infected with the furious form make.
I just feel like a lot of zombie movies are somehow based on rabies infections. I don't know how well known human rabies infections were known about, because so many people die so quickly from it, and before the age of YouTube, how did people even know? But maybe they saw infected raccoons or dogs or cats or Old Yeller or one of those movies and saw that creates Yeah. Isn't
I'm
that
still
sad?
traumatized by that. Ugh.
Yeah.
That was in our reading list. We had to read the book when I was like in 6th or 7th grade. Wow.
It was really sad.
That one and Where the Red Fern Grows. Like, way to gut a child, right? No wonder I have an unhealthy attachment to my dogs, who are my children.
Yeah. But I think it's terrifying and fascinating, and anything that turns you into, I want to say rabid crazy monster, like a euphemism or a metaphorical, but it's actually a rabid monster because it's terrifying that it takes the person, place, thing, animal that you love, and all of a sudden it seems completely different and it lost its mind, because it did. Encephalitis makes your brain swollen, and then you become a different person and you act differently because your brain was affected. It doesn't work the same way. There's so much inflammation in there that your normal processes aren't working. It has very similar to our zombie 101 physiology, where parts of your brain are shutting down and not working properly. You look terrifying. You're foaming at the mouth. You're highly, highly aggressive because that virus wants you to transmit that virus to another host or person. And so I think this is a huge cornerstone of pop culture and zombie lore and horror movies and so many different things. Like, what is it, Pet Cemetery, where that, they have the crazy scary dog like Cujo, and Cujo just seems like maybe that was a dog with rabies or something instead of a horror dog. I don't remember Cujo very well. Do you?
All these movies made me sad. I watched them once and I was like, not the dog! And then I never ever watched them again.
There are whole Reddit forums where they don't watch this movie because they hurt the dog or whatever. They have the dog hurt warning.
Yeah, I think instead of a parental explicit advisory, we need to have a critter gets harmed advisory for all of us that are sensitive to that, but don't care how many humans are brutally murdered in the horror film. That's the kind of advisory I could get behind.
Yeah, and if you're a normal person, that's Team Human. We're sorry, kind of.
I'm not. Right.
Okay, now for the fun part. Speculative science time. Stacy, this is my favorite part of the podcast because you and I have fundamental differences in how we feel about the possibility, rationale, logistics behind an infectious disease mutating enough to become a zombie infectious agent or zombie virus. But Stacy, on a scale from 1 to 10, could rabies ever evolve into a real zombie virus? What do you think?
Oh, goodness. The scale. I know that I was Debbie Downer with cordyceps, giving it a 3. I do think that rabies has more characteristics of a zombie apocalypse than cordyceps does. I think that it's definitely too lethal too fast, and it's definitely too fragile right now. But if it could overcome 2 out of the 5 criteria, then I think that we have a reasonable chance of this one perhaps causing a zombie outbreak. I'm going to give it a 6. I'm going to give it a 6.
Yes! Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So I obviously more optimistic than you because I give this a solid 9. I think
9.
Yes, I think rabies, it affects your brain, behavior, and mind to make you aggressive and bitey. And what perfect way to look like the pop culture zombie that you see on TVs and shows and movies today, where you have like an aggressive, crazy person. And that's real life right now. How beautiful. How perfect is that? It's perfect. It's the perfect zombie virus.
No, I can't call it perfect because, yes, all of those things are true. It's extremely terrifying. But the hurdles that it has to overcome to take over the world and cause a zombie apocalypse are also profound. I mean, they're almost bigger than how perfect it is.
It just needs 2 or 3 tiny little quick, easy mutations. It has to last in the environment better. It has to kill a little bit slower, but one of the adaptations that it can take instead of lethality, if it reduces its lethality and just shuts down the brain to make the host, instead of die, their body can only half die and turn into a zombie. That would be the perfect adaptation, by the way. And aerosol transmission, which it's already in the mouth and saliva, in theory, that seems it could be a pretty easy jump. I think it's totally reasonable within our millennia, because
Well,
I can't
let's
say
think about
lifetime.
it this way. I mean, so many thousands. But let's think about it this way. Flu, we have to make 4 or 5 different vaccines every year for how quickly flu mutates. Rabies, we have made a new vaccine. We've been giving the same. We've made one that maybe is less likely to cause side effects, but we're using the same rabies vaccine that we've been using forever, which is a good example of how slow mutations happen in this particular pathogen, which really limits how easily and quickly it would need to make some crazy evolutionary jump to be able to cause an apocalypse.
Okay, I'll give you that. It's very stable and it's not highly mutagenic. However, mutagenic means it causes mutation. So it would have to be exposed to a mutagenic compound, which brings me into my next theory. What if there was nuclear war? And we all know that radiation is highly mutagenic. What about, instead of worrying just about radiation poisoning and things like that, what if there was some sort of nuclear war or nuclear winter, and we all went into our bunkers? So say a good percentage of the human population survived, but all of the infectious organisms and stuff like that had an opportunity to mutate that way.
Don't give other people ideas about books and movies that they can make all right.
I mean, I'm not writing a book right now, so...
You know that I love apocalypse and dystopian fiction, right? You know that I love that, you know. But I think that if we're crossing genres that way, then anything is possible. And so if we're trying to be as speculative with what we have right now, I would say a radioactive triggered rabies zombie apocalypse on the scale of 1 to 10 is 0.3.
Ugh, you're the worst. Okay, so here's the problem. Rabies doesn't have a therapeutic use or advantage. It doesn't have a reason for laboratory sciences to be modifying it in a laboratory setting. You know, in our last episode, we talked about how cordyceps, it's anti-cancer and it's healing and it's invigorating and all these things. So it has its uses in society and humanity right now, but rabies doesn't. So it's not likely to be any part of a laboratory release, accidental laboratory release, except for if it was being worked with as a bioweapon, which is a real possibility. There could be some terrorist organization or a country that wants to advance bioweapons, and this would be a wonderful bioweapon because it is terrifying. And if humanity created the mutation, that would be one way to make it aerosol, so they can drop an aerosol bomb of it. And then what would be more terrifying if you're at war to see people foaming at the mouth and biting each other, but they would also have to change how long it takes, the incubation time, the infectivity, the amount of time it takes and stuff like that. So there would be some mutations that would have to take place. So in biowarfare, I think it would be difficult to make some of those changes, but what are some other ways that this could legitimately happen? Or what are some ways that the mutation rate could be accelerated? Because with climate change, for example, that changes a lot of things, but this isn't really one of those. So
yeah,
what is
hot, right?
Yeah.
Rabies
So what's our
hot.
avenue? What's the potential avenue to get this to become mutated in a way that would cause a zombie apocalypse?
I can't see an easy path to that. I'm so sorry, but I can't map you out an easy path like I could with cordyceps. Because you're right, we're not eating rabies virus. We're not using rabies virus for mental health support. The reason why it might be in a lab other than bioweapons is just advancing drug science, right? Like trying to use a virus that is happy in the central nervous system to transport drug particles to things that are going wrong in the central nervous system. Like, you know, you have a brain tumor, and I like for some reason, I like the idea of using something pathogenic to treat something severe like cancer, right? So if they could figure out a way to attach a drug particle or another virus particle or a protein that could then hitch a ride on the rabies virus to get to the brain to treat something, I guess I could bullshit my way into that misfiring and causing an apocalypse.
Boom.
Or they're trying to make better vaccinations and somebody screws up and puts one vial into another vial that they weren't supposed to put together. I don't know.
I love your vaccination theory because here's what makes it so eloquent. That's a beautiful theory. And this viral tropism is very unique to rabies. So there aren't a lot of viruses or infectious organisms that get directed immediately and directly to the brain tissue and nervous system and nerve tissue quite like rabies does. So it could be used or exploited or utilized in a way that in a laboratory setting, if you did have a brain tumor or brain cancer, this would be an excellent way to target your vaccine or treatment immediately and directly to the brain tissue. And so what I would do if I were a scientist, and this was an option, is to attenuate the rabies virus. And attenuate just means to take away that pathogenicity or destructive quality, and just use its viral tropism where it goes straight to brain tissue, and then attach a drug to it. So you attach your chemotherapy or tumor killing drug, and then it would be directed immediately and directly into brain tissue very quickly and easily. And just like you said for the vaccine theory, the way that would become unattenuated is if it had gene transfer with a vial sitting next to it that somehow got contaminated with unattenuated virus. And it only takes maybe one person to get infected, like they do the treatment for the cancer, and then that person got infected, and then maybe it was mutated enough that it could spread to a greater number of people faster. But maybe I'm going to take my will it zombie score from a 9 down to an 8, just because it would be really hard to theorize how to realistically get this to mutate any faster than it already is doing naturally, which would take thousands of years. But it is still like the perfect organism for a zombie apocalypse, if only it mutated faster.
I think that there's other options that work better.
Like what?
Well, I don't want to tell you. I want to save my 10 out of 10.
Oh, you mean other options for different organisms, not other options for rabies mutation.
No, I think there's different organisms that are higher on the will it zombie score.
Really? Did you say a 10 out of 10?
I may or may not have a 10 out of 10 in my pocket.
Oh my word! I don't even know what that would be. This one today was going to be like my absolute favorite top that I can think of, but I'm starting to think maybe I know where you're going with this, but I'm not gonna reveal your secrets. But
okay, don't reveal it.
Wait, can I ask you for a clue? Can I ask you for a hint? Can I give you a hint and then you can tell me if my hint is close?
Okay. We can do that.
How do I do it without revealing too much? But I'm going. Right? Is it a protein?
Well, no. I mean, everything has protein in it.
Okay. I'm getting way too excited. It's because it really is like the most perfect one, but it's like, oh my god, I'm so excited. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, we're not going to reveal too many secrets for future episodes, but stay tuned for organisms in the future that may be higher on the will it zombie scale. Although 6 out of 10 is pretty good for rabies, I'd say. Your score of 6 is pretty surprising, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if it passed, depending on what school it went to.
Hell yeah, that's pretty cool. I dig it. I love it. This is a good one. So if it mutated just right, we might get 28 days later levels of freak out.
No, hang on. Yeah, we didn't talk about 28 days later. We should put that on the list, too, because the rage virus is based on rabies.
Oh, yeah, furious.
And it's bred in a lab on purpose. They were trying to manage human aggression, and they accidentally got it wrong.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, how are they trying to, manage human aggression with rabies?
They were trying to make treatments for human aggression and mental illness in a lab, so they were using rabies virus, modified or attenuated, and they were putting it in primates, and then it went totally wrong, and caused the rage virus, which is the basis of 28 days later, 28 weeks later, but then they kind of skipped over it in the new movie 28 years later. They just, the whole basis for the whole thing, they didn't go into it anymore, which is frustrating. Because then 28 days later, the impression was that all the people with the rage virus are going to starve, and then 28 weeks later, there was an indication that maybe some of them were able to live or survive the virus but were still infective. And then the new movie didn't support all of the other stuff. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen the newest one.
Stick with the science.
Yeah. Okay. So if it mutated just right, we might just get 28 days later level of freakout.
Perhaps. It definitely hijacks behavior. I think it needs more than just a little evolutionary push.
That's fair. I think I agree with you. It's still a beautiful virus, though. I don't care what you say.
It is beautiful. Let me just verbalize what we've gone through in a succinct manner and make sure that we didn't miss anything interesting. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. So rabies moves through the nervous system, causes severe brain changes. 2/3 of patients have the furious form, 1/3 of patients have the paralytic form. We're going with furious form for zombie apocalypse. Some animals are resistant, really cool. Don't touch a wildlife, get your animals vaccinated. Oh, and if you think that you've ever been exposed to rabies, seek medical care immediately, because we can't treat it when you start to have symptoms of rabies, but we can prevent it from causing symptoms. So if you know right away that you've been bitten, you go in, you get some injections of immunoglobulin, which is an immediate immune boost to the area where the bite was. And then you also get the rabies vaccination so that you're protected in 2 ways. So do it, go see a doctor. Tell them that you might have been exposed.
And immunoglobulin is just antibodies, right? So it's antibodies that can bind the...
I love that you translate for me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, your stupid big words. And then they give you those antibodies and a death heat-sinking missile for rabies. It'll bind it all up and keep it from circulating anymore. And it'll help your immune system to recognize it so it can clear it out of your system fast enough that hopefully that virus can't take over and kill you. But rabies is incredibly lethal. It has a very high morbidity and mortality rate. And so this is where you want to get treatment or vaccination before symptoms start, because once the symptoms start, that means your brain's already swollen and inflamed and there's already a ton of virus already circulating.
Well, on the topic of the lethality, we only know of 20 people that have ever been documented to have survived rabies encephalitis, and 90% of them have long-lasting severe neurologic damage. So some people have lived, but their quality of life is likely much less than what it was before the virus.
Because of the brain damage? So did those people get vaccinated or treated after they started having symptoms? Or is it possible to survive even without any kind of treatment or vaccination, regardless of the progress of the infection?
We don't know about whether or not you can survive without any treatment. Those were humans that sought treatment after onset of signs and were documented that way.
That's pretty gnarly.
20.
That's
the whole
not a lot.
world.
That's
out
not a
of
lot.
600,000 per year.
It's really bad. So the reason why this doesn't do well in nature, the reason why everybody's not dead of rabies is because you die so quickly that you can't transmit it as quickly and easily. It doesn't live well in the environment. So the recipe for a pandemic, it's lacking some of those things. And sometimes lethality seems really cool, but if it's way too lethal, then just like Ebola and some other organisms, you die so quickly that you can't transmit it to a bunch of people first. And like you said, it's not transmissible as it's cooking. So if it takes however many months to create symptoms, there are a lot of organisms that can transmit while it's cooking before you ever have symptoms, but this is not one of those. So it's kind of lacking in that regard. So there are a few mutations that would need to take place to get this to become the perfect zombie organism, but I think it has so many classical perfect attributes that I think that this would be a beautiful organism to be a zombie apocalypse causing infectious disease.
The One Health Trust on their website has it labeled rabies, the original zombie virus.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it totally
I mean, that's
is.
saying something, right?
It's legit. Every episode, we take a moment to step back and look at the historical or cultural roots of zombie myths, because the undead didn't start with George Romero. They go way back. This week's folklore feature rabid spirits and ancient undead from India, and maybe some other parts of the world, depending on what Stacey wants to talk about.
So rabies is still a pretty big zoonotic concern in India. And the Hindu religious structure has so many different myths and demons and supernatural spirits that could possibly be linked to maybe rabies, that it was really hard to tease through, not having any kind of advanced degree in Hinduism. But there was one that jumped out to me that seems pretty common to come up when we're thinking about rabies as a possible mythological folklore component for zombies. There's a spirit in the Hindu tradition that inhabits corpses and is known to feed on blood. And some of the descriptors of that particular mythological spirit has a lot of the same behaviors that we could interpret as a human infected with rabies virus, like attacking loved ones randomly or previously loved ones, rampaging through villages, just like crazy, wild, aggressive behavior. So that was one that I found interesting. There's a lot of other ones. In fact, there's so much research on this that if anybody is looking for a master's project in literature, you should probably explore Indian literature and zombies within that literature. Really cool stuff.
Or it sounds like also vampire lore.
Oh, yeah. Well, the whole vampire lore is a whole nother thing, and I think that we should do an entire season on vampire lore, because I could get it done, too, and the science and vampire.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, I could get that done for us, too. And werewolves as well. So if anybody's interested in zombies and werewolves, we could talk about that for a whole season, too.
Okay, can you just talk a little bit about it now in relation to rabies? Because it sounds like a lot of the rabies viruses created a lot of vampire lore just because of the biting tendency and the aggression.
The biting and avoiding food and drink, but feeling okay with biting and being exposed to blood, right?
Oh,
like that distinction. Yeah. So if you're afraid to drink the wine that everyone's offering you, but you will tear out somebody's throat and seem to be drinking their blood, it makes sense that there would be a vampire myth associated with rabies too. But I don't want to ruin it because it's so good. The vampire werewolf debate. Where rabies is also associated with werewolf folklore.
Just give us a little tidbit. Just give us a little taste.
More than I just did?
Yes. What, you didn't talk about werewolves at all.
Oh, you want werewolves? Okay.
I want werewolves.
Yeah, so when it comes to rabies virus and werewolf mythology, it's more of a folklore tradition and cultures that have endemic wolf populations, of course, and that are densely forested regions and that have a Judeo-Christian background. So that's kind of the recipe for rabies virus as part of, werewolf folklore. So because it can take months from the bite, there was a connotation of lunar cycles before you become the ravening rabid beast or the lichen, the werewolf. Because there's a loss of speech patterns and neurologic changes that change how the human with rabies will move. It changes your gait, the way you walk, the way you stand, the way you sit, the way you interact with your environment. And some of that is not feeling comfortable standing upright or preferring to be on all fours for moving around. For some people with the furious form and some people with the paralytic form too, they just have weakness at first. And so they might scoot themselves around or not walk in an upright manner. So there's some crossover with that and werewolf lichen turning into a beast. There you go. That was not succinct at all or smooth. But did you get the picture?
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't realize that. And it makes sense. You have a monthly cycle because it's one of the few infectious organisms that I know of that take or can take that long to produce symptoms and go through its life cycle. And if in the past, or before the age of science and infectious disease research, this would be one of the most terrifying things to see or experience. And if it's endemic throughout the world, this has a lot of culture and a lot of history because this has been known about for millennia, thousands of years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, as long as we've been humans, we have been getting rabies from other animals. So it's like demons, zombies, vampires, werewolves, skinwalkers, maybe, maybe not. You know, all of these mythological ravening beasties could all trace their lineage back to humans making stories about other humans infected with rabies virus.
Can I just read a list of a few different countries' cultural cryptids that may have been inspired by rabies? But I know I'm not going to pronounce any of these correctly, but I just wanted to touch on a few of them. They're Hindu mythological spirits that inhabit corpses and feed on blood. They're possibly inspired by visible symptoms of diseases like rabies. Then in China, there's the Jiangxi, the hopping vampires. Their stiff bodies possibly explained by rigor mortis and neurological damage like paralysis or paralytic rabies. And then again, we're talking about Haitian voodoo zombies, where in the last episode we talked about corpses that seem to be revived under a spell, but real life cases may involve toxins or viruses. We talked about tetrodotoxin. Rabies is another potential explanation that we hadn't really talked about before. And in modern interpretations, Quarantine, the movie from 2008, Train to Busan.
That's my favorite. It's one of my favorite.
Train to Busan is such a good movie.
Oh my god! Did you watch the second one?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's The Peninsula, I think it's what it's called. Yeah.
The Peninsula?
Sorry. Yeah, it's the second one.
Oh.
That might be wrong, but then there's even in Norse mythology, there's the Draugr, or I don't know how to pronounce that. If you're in D&D, you know what I'm talking about. There's Norse zombies that may or may not be related to rabies virus. Draugr.
Is that D&D?
I don't know how to pronounce it. No, that's what they're called, but we used them in D&D.
I don't know what this next reference is, but it says Survivor Song is also riffing.
Oh yeah, that's a book. Yeah, that's based on rabies. Yeah, that's a book. I was just pulling contemporary media in because there's some interesting stuff. And that's how I got the idea of having the list of relevant zombie fiction for whichever organism we're talking about. I'm putting my microphone down.
Pause.
So there's too many folklore and cultural references to rabies throughout history for us to even scratch the surface. Because rabies is such a deeply upsetting illness, and because of its dramatic symptoms and its 100% fatality rate, there's so many different cultures that have taken that and based myths and folklore and creatures off of it. So it's impossible for us to do a deep dive. But just to wet your whistle, in India, there is a spirit that can possess corpses and navigate those corpses. They drink blood, they cause a lot of havoc, and they're called the Vatala. Nordic culture, there is an undead creature that attacks humans and may or may not be eating of flesh, and that one's the Draugr. Just a little bit for you.
Can you talk about Survivor Song? Because I've never heard of that before.
So in modern zombie fiction, the rabies virus is a common theme for starting the zombie apocalypse, for the pathogen that leads to it. And we have a whole list of references and movies and books for everyone to check out. But just quickly, movies, World War Z, the book, not the movie, but the World War Z book is reportedly a rabies virus that caused the outbreak. They don't mention that in the movie. In Train to Busan, they don't say explicitly that it's rabies virus, but it's implied that there's a virus released from a biological facility that's affecting just mammals, and so we're assuming that it's probably rabies virus. And in books, there is a book called Survivor Song. It's fairly new. It was released in 2019, which is weirdly apropos timing, that uses rabies as the base pathogen. So there you go. There's a few things for you to look into.
Gorgeous. Thank you. Folklore meet microbiology. It's all connected. Thanks for listening to our culture and folklore segment of the podcast. Run to our Patreon for some deep dives and also some wild tangents. And stay tuned for our speculative science segment of the podcast.
All right.
We've explored the virus, we've wandered through the folklore, and we even ran it through our Will It Zombie gauntlet. But now, buckle up, because I've saved my absolute favorite part for last. Let's circle back to rabies, just for a minute, for a theory that bites, literally. We're talking Stacy's zombie bite theory, brain-eating logic, and whether devouring gray matter actually ruins your odds of spreading the infection. Welcome to the final stop on this undead ride.
Okay, so during our last episode, I think you came up with a really incredible theory, and it was pretty mind-blowing, and not a lot of movies, pop culture, the TV shows, or even the little science that they do in those explain or talk about why zombies bite. And more specifically, why do they eat brains or intestines and things like that? So in this particular example, zombies, I think it would be logical to say that zombies bite just for transmission, but that doesn't really explain eating brains or intestines, because if you kill your host, then you kill your chances of spreading the virus or organism, bacteria, or whatever it is. You kill your chances of transmission. Do you think that since rabies, in particular, right now, with animals or mammals or people that are infected, they want to bite. And so this is a perfect zombie correlate. And this is the exact reason why they do bite, is because the viral load is in the saliva and in the mouth. And the virus tricks you into not swallowing and tricks you into not drinking water. It's called hydrophobic behavior, because it doesn't want that viral load in the saliva to be diluted. And it wants as much virus as possible to be in your mouth. So when you bite somebody and break skin and their bloodstream is exposed to the virus, you get as much of a viral load as possible. So this is the perfect explanation why a zombie would bite, because rabies already does it in real life, in real time right now. So from a virology perspective, biting is the perfect viral strategy. And so this could be where a lot of zombie lore came from, and vampires and werewolves and all of those terrifying cryptids that we know about. I think this is the history of a lot of our lore, and it's because it's real life and it's terrifying. So rabies already does this. It also removes the need for high brain function. So in rabies infection, you get encephalitis. So since it has a viral tropism for neurological tissue, brain tissue, and nerves, it causes a lot of inflammation and swelling in your brain. Because of that encephalitis or swelling, I think a lot of your normal brain function is inhibited. In some cases, the speech ability is inhibited. And that, in some cases, also creates paralysis. I'm assuming because of the same mechanisms of action that we talked about with Zombie Physiology 101, where I think the cerebellum and other parts of your brain, cerebral cortex and things like that, are damaged with this inflammation and encephalitis. Or in the case of a zombie, there's rotting and degradation. But you lose the ability to speak, you lose some function with motor abilities, with walking or movement. So I think there are a lot of correlates here with the pop culture. So there's an evolutionary shortcut, and violence equates to transmission in this case, because the more aggressive the infected person or animal is, the more likely it is to transmit or bite to another person that's not infected to spread the organism. So zombies bite because the virus wants them to, which is messed up, but it's also cool. But do you have any additional theories on nutrition, biting, encephalitis, or brain eating, or anything like this that might apply directly to rabies specifically?
So the rabies virus, it preferentially attacks gray matter. So your cerebellum is not necessarily a preferred place. It's more of the front of your brain than the brainstem. And so that could be part of the reason why we could speculate that there was some ambulation still happening. The zombies were still getting around. When it comes to just basic zombie physiology 101 and why they might eat brains, because we know they're biting because of the rabies virus. We have data for that. But why would a virus that needs a brain to make its hosts produce more virus and transmit that virus, why would it eat the one part of the body that it needs? And I wonder, from a rabies virus perspective, if the brain eating is maybe not inherent to this particular flavor of zombie, and perhaps the brain eating component was the fact that that particular person with rabies was attacking the easiest place to get to bite, which is the neck or the face. And the rabies virus works faster the closer to the brain the bite happens. So instead of eating a brain, these people are being bit around the neck and the face and the head because the rabies virus is perhaps modifying their behavior so that they can maximize transmission amount of virus and how quickly the virus can access what it needs in the next host, like brain tissue.
Hell yes. I love this theory. And it directly applies to rabies because just like you said earlier in the episode, if you get bit in the toe, it's going to take a lot longer for you to start developing symptoms and for the brain tissue to become infected because that viral tropism is going to travel all the way from that toe or wherever the bite site was, and it's looking for brain matter and brain tissue. So that is a beautiful and eloquent theory. Once again, Stacy, you did it again. You're beautiful. Okay, so the closer it is, the bite is to the brain, it's a proximity thing for rabies in particular, but the closer the bite is to the brain tissue or the neck, face, head area, the faster it's going to infect, and the faster that host organism is going to become infected and then able to then transmit to the next victim. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You're beautiful, Stacy. I love you.
Oh, I love you too. Thank you.
You're fucking brilliant. I love this.
I like to make up bullshit theories about things.
No, it's absolutely logical, scientifically sound. It was eloquent and beautiful. I loved it. Can I ask you one more question? We talked a little bit about the flavors of zombies, right? So one zombie flavor that we mentioned today was the 28 days later zombie because it's theorized in that movie and a couple others that there was a viral infection that had a similar process, that had similar characteristics. And so with the 28 days later zombie, where it sounds like they were using rabies virus in their experiments in the laboratory, they had an accidental laboratory release after they attenuated and modified the virus, and then it regressed back. So my question to you, because 28 days later has a very unique zombie characteristic, and it's the fast, rapid movement and running, which is absolutely fucking terrifying, but it's unusual for like the pop culture zombie. And I think that it would be harder to explain because if you had a zombie for an extended period of time, there is going to be a certain amount of degradation and rot. And if there's encephalitis caused by rabies, there should in theory be brain damage that would affect like the motor cortex and things like that. So do you have any kind of explanation or scientific theory behind how and why they move so quickly and how that plays into like a rabies virus in particular or transmission and things like that?
Yeah, there's the subgenre of zombie fiction that is viral based. Many of those zombies move quickly because it doesn't necessarily imply that the human host is fully dead yet when they're running around. Like in 28 days later, it doesn't say anyone's dead, right? They're alive. They're just rage humans infected with this. In World War Z, it doesn't imply that they survived to a rotting stage. That the zombies remained reanimated to a rotting stage, and that was a viral based one. Train to Busan, it's the beginning of the outbreak. The zombies are fast, right? And that's also based upon a virus being released from a biological lab inadvertently. So you'll notice that fast zombies are often related to movies that have an obvious viral pathogen origin for the zombie apocalypse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're talking about versus a bacterial or a parasitic or other type of organism, or?
Yeah, versus other directly responsible pathogens causing I don't know. I guess that theory doesn't fully stand up, depending on what fiction we're thinking about. I guess that theory doesn't fully stand up. I guess it depends on how scared we want to be, right? If we want to be really scared the zombies are fast, if we want to be kind of scared they're kind of slow and you can get away from them.
Well, there's some kind of connection we can make with, like, if that particular zombie can't eat or drink because rabies virus prevents you from diluting the viral load in your mouth by it doesn't want you to drink water, I'm assuming that That's why they have such a strict time frame. And 28 days later, don't they have a very specific time where they believe that after that time, all the zombies will be dead because they don't have a food
it's like
source
9
anymore?
weeks. Yeah, because
9 weeks.
they're still humans 9 weeks. Yeah.
So I think that's why they're quick, is because they do die after 9 weeks, theoretically. I don't know if that actually happened in the movie or if they adapted or something like that.
Well, that's a huge other debate, which I don't think we have the time to get into.
Oh.
We could
I think we
one
do.
day have a Patreon debate about 28 days later, 28 weeks later, and 28 years later. But I don't think that that's in the scope of this particular discussion.
Okay, that's fair. I think here's my theory and explanation is the higher functioning parts of the brain and the parts of the brain involving like the motor cortex and sensory sensory capabilities and movement are not affected for the first few weeks. I think it takes time for the bodily systems and neurological tissue to die. And in this particular movie, it's theorized that they only survive for a couple of months. And so that isn't really enough time for all of the other parts of the brain to die and rot. Whereas in other pop culture references, they can be in hibernation mode for months or years at a time. And I think that's the difference is because it's a shorter period of time that they are more alive than dead. So that's why they still have a lot of their motor function retained. And then I haven't seen the 28 years later or whatever, but I'm assuming that the longer an organism drags along and stays alive, the more different functions and capabilities are going to be degraded, like walking and talking. And another correlate that we can use is, for example, in cordyceps, when we were talking about that in episode 1, they have a sort of symbiotic capability to share their oxygens. Cordyceps themselves do oxygen respiration, so they could be breathing for the organism in a way. The host body is the scaffolding that we talked about, like the scaffolding as the straw in mycelium, where there's wall-to-wall mycelium growing in the blood vessels of the infected organism. And it could also be doing its own oxygen respiration. So even if the human's lungs are deteriorated to the point where it can't do oxygen exchange anymore, the mycelium can do it for the organism. But in rabies, you don't have an organism that can respirate in the same way. So maybe they're more short-lived. Maybe they can move faster because they're more short-lived and those parts of the brain haven't died yet, so they can run in a violent and terrifying and aggressive way. And that's how we create different zombie flavors, is with a viral organism, which isn't an organism that's autonomous in its own, like a fungus is. Viruses have to live inside human cells, and it's the human cell that helps it replicate and helps it do its function. Maybe that's the difference. The viral or rabies zombie can just move quickly because they don't last as long and they don't hibernate as long, in theory, scientifically.
I could buy that theory. And then you also have perhaps an added to that theory that if you're exhibiting zombie traits but you're not technically dead yet, you're fast. Or if you die very quickly from the zombie pathogen but you reanimate just as quickly, like in World War Z, it's 10 seconds, right? From the time that you are bit, from the time that you are exposed to the time that you become quote-unquote zombie. So with the viral pathogens, it feels like you're not necessarily dead when you are a zombie, right? You don't, the criteria of being dead isn't necessarily there.
Right. You talked a little bit last episode about how even today with our scientific and medical advances, it's still hard sometimes to determine what's actually dead or not.
Yeah. We say that if you're not dead unless you've been warm and dead for 24 hours.
Oh, it's gross.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that note, I love that. Beautiful.
So in the main episode, you may have heard us boldly declare that rabies doesn't really have any clinical or therapeutic applications, and that it's more of a viral menace than a medical marvel. Well, we stand corrected. It turns out this virus has been sneaking its way into some pretty fascinating corners of modern medicine. From cancer treatments to targeted vaccine delivery, researchers are actually experimenting with rabies-based tools and real-world therapies. So if you're curious like we were, and you want to hear the rest of the story, we've put together a special extended segment just for our Patreon listeners. Head over to patreon.com/mutanthollow to unlock the full deep dive into rabies as a therapeutic tool, featuring brainy research, viral hijinks, and the surprisingly helpful side of this horrifying little pathogen. See you in the hollow.
Prepare for a tangent.
Tangent incoming.
Okay, so you told us a crazy rabid zombie cat story in the episode, but do you have any other crazy ones that you want to share with us?
I think I need a fluffer because I don't remember.
So this one was you gave it a horse tranquilizer and it still wouldn't go down because it was already a zombie. And you said it wasn't a zombie. Yeah, because it wasn't too crazy or inappropriate.
Here's a 2009 article from Dr. Bud Stewart. We could tell somebody else's rabies story.
Okay.
1955. This is an old one.
Hell yeah.
Oh no. Oh no, this is bad.
What happened?
I'm going to read you a story from Dr. Bud Stewart, a veterinarian. This was published in DVM 360 magazine in September 28th of 2009. Can we do this? Is this legal?
Fuck yeah.
Dr. Stewart reports, in 1955, during my first year in a mixed animal practice in the Fingers Lake area of New York, I received a phone call just as I was preparing to leave and go home for dinner. The call was from a client who was a farmer. He told me that his young beagle seemed to have something stuck in its mouth, as it would not close. He had felt around in the mouth, but had found nothing. Warning bells went off in my head. I advised him to bring the dog in immediately. He arrived in about 20 minutes with a dull-looking animal. Its lower jaw was hanging, and the pupils of its eyes were different sizes. That's called a nisocoria, which is one of my favorite words. One of them was large, and one of them was pinpoint-sized. I told him his dog was very ill, and I had him pick the dog up from the exam table and follow me to our tiny isolation ward. That's something we wouldn't be able to do these days. You can't knowingly expose another human to a zoonotic infection. Once we were there, I had him place the dog in a cage with a dish of water. I then informed him that his dog likely had a fatal disease, but I would pursue a firm diagnosis. When he left the office, I quickly called the state veterinarian who lived in our town and was a friend of mine. I told him I thought I might have a case of dumb rabies. Right? We talked about the paralytic form, the furious versus the dumb form. He quickly came over and looked at the dog in the cage. After rattling the cage door and waving a cigarette lighter in front of the dog, nice, with no response from either test, he pronounced it as a case of canine distemper. He pointed out that there had been no cases of rabies in Steuben County in more than 35 years. The practice owner later agreed with him after viewing the dog. When the dog died the next day, I removed the head and express mailed it to the veterinary college at Cornell University for a brain exam. A veterinarian at Cornell excitedly called me back the next day. That never happens anymore either. It takes freaking forever. To inform me that the brain had indeed tested positive for rabies. I immediately called the farmer and told him to see his doctor for rabies vaccination. This case was the first in a massive outbreak of rabies in central New York. Cases were diagnosed in cats, dogs, cows, and horses, as well as some wild animals. The entire area was quarantined, and no animals could be shipped or sold. A huge vaccination program was put in place and went on for months. And all of this started with one little beagle. Bam.
Frick yeah, dude. That zombie cat would be dope.
Zombie cats. So there you go. There's a rabies outbreak story from 1955 as reported by eyewitness Dr. Stewart.
I freaking love that. So I think a zombie cow foaming at the mouth would look awesome, but can it bite you? Like, how would it transmit virus?
Oh, sure. Cows can bite the shit out of you. So when I was on dairy rotation, have I told you this story?
No.
Okay. So I wanted to be, for a hot minute in vet school, I wanted to be a dairy vet because I really loved my dairy rotation, right? But as I was navigating all of those cows, they were always biting me. Like, they'd bite your upper arm if you did something that you didn't like. And they have a hard pad on the top of their mouth, but they have teeth on the bottom. So it's like a really uncomfortable pinch, and they can break skin. The story that I was thinking of, though, was why I'm not a dairy vet right now. I'm really short. I'm going to throw that out there. Self-disclosure. I'm really short. And cows are tall. And to be an acceptable dairy vet, you have to be able to do rectal examinations, and you're palpating.
So things got a little graphic here when Stacy started telling a very real story from her vet school days. Something about a cow, a glove, and a whole lot of, well, let's just say it got graphic fast. So we decided to spare the more sensitive ears here on the main feed, but if you're curious, or if you're just weird like us, you can hear the full unfiltered story over on our Patreon. Brace yourself and head to patreon.com/mutanthollow for the full cow exam tale and all its squishy glory.
There you go. There's your 10-minute tangent.
You're welcome, Patreon. Okay, I'm gonna hit stop. Don't say anything funny.
Can you move?
That's it for today's episode of Mutant Hollow. If you've learned something, got the chills, or suddenly felt itchy, congrats! You're one of us now. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and check the bonus material on Patreon, where Stacy and I share extra theories, weird research, and fungal fan fiction. Mutant Hollow, where the line between science and horror is very, very blurry.
See, we're blowing minds, but nothing else.
Okay, tell Fergus I said what's up. I've got what I wanted from you.
Speaking of blowing.
I mean, you totally did. Blew my mind. But nothing else. Well, I hope the cordyceps under your boobs chills out a little bit too.
You know, it's so itchy. I gotta put some fun on it. I need a cream.
Put some powder up in that motherfucker.
It's fun.
Mutant Hollow. Don't worry. We're only mostly dead. Gnaw on that subscribe button like it's your last brain. Join the horde. One click could save your brain.
Oh yeah, chemokines. Nice. Loosening up them tight junctions. Hey!
Oh, Lord.
Just temporarily. It's like a bottle of Merlot. And a clove cigarette.
I can't take you anywhere.
Typo-negative songs in the background.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. Hamsters are cute. Hamsters can kill you, too.
I would like to know how.
Hamster zoonotic disease? You haven't heard of that?
No.
Oh. Well, they can give you lymphoplasmacytic choriomeningitis virus.
Tell me more.
Contact with hamsters' saliva. So the hamster can bite you and then you get it.
And they're a zombie? And then you're a zombie?
I mean, I guess, but it's more like you just get a little bit of a flu. In rare cases, you can get meningitis or encephalitis, but I don't think that it's zombie-worthy. It's just entertaining.
I think
they can also give you ringworm.
Ew.
Yeah.
I think anything with encephalitis has some zombie potential.
Anything with encephalitis has zombie potential. That should be a tagline. You should add that to all kinds of our stuff.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Oh.
Like, hiya!
Say it again. Say it again.
I was up to my ear in that butthole. Yeah, butthole's better.
Yeah, this is an excellent soundbite. Okay.
I like the warning. That's
I figured that would be a good thing since we're offensive as fuck, so.
And I'm breathing. I'm swallowing. I'm
okay,
breathing.
Go ahead and mute yourself for a second, girl.
Fucking mess. Reporting live from my little dungeon.
She's got a mic we lovingly call the Fuzzy Soul Stealer, or Soul Eater.
What do you think? Soul Stealer or Soul Eater?
I like Soul Eater. You can't sniffle.
I'm sorry. I have to breathe. I'm a human.
Stop breathing, Stacy. Okay.
Studying my boob.
Oh my fucking god.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm gonna hold my breath.
Don't do that. Okay.
So you get what you get.
We're doing great. We're doing great here. Stacy?
Sorry.
Get back on track. Okay. Focus.
One of my favorites. I have some more stuff up my sleeve for you though, so.
You do?
We're not blowing our whole wad in 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Money shot. I don't know. I'm having a day. I don't know what's happening. Stop now. I gotta drink water.
Oh, now I got the fucking giggles. I'm losing all my hydration and laughing tears.
Right. That's called an insensible loss. In case you wanted to know.
I did. I so did.
God.
Oh my god, it's so hot in here.
You're gonna get cordyceps boobs.
I mean, bad. They're all itchy.
Yes, and also we should work on our zombie growl.
Wait, are we supposed to make a zombie girl?
Yeah.
Alan farted.
I guess if you're doing zombie yoga, that would happen, and it's neutral. And it's totally okay.
Wait, we're doing zombie yoga?
Fuck yeah. Oh my fucking god. Welcome to the Hollow. Side effects of listening may include mutation.
For the horde!
Okay, yeah.
Good enough.